September 20th, 1944. Arracourt, France. 12:47 p.m. The morning fog that had grounded most aircraft was finally lifting when Major Charles Carpenter spotted them through his windscreen, a formation of German armour advancing across the open fields toward American positions. His hands tightened on the control stick of his Piper L-4 Grasshopper, an aircraft never designed for what he was about to attempt. Some people around here think I'm nuts, but I just believe that if we're going to fight a war, we have to get on with it 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day. These words, spoken to a Stars and Stripes correspondent just days earlier, would define the philosophy of the man who transformed an unarmed observation plane into one of the most unlikely tank destroyers in military history. The former high school history teacher from Illinois had mounted 6 bazookas on the wing struts of his fragile aircraft. What German tank crews couldn't know was that their 45-ton Panthers and 57-ton Tigers were about to face their most improbable adversary, a fabric-covered plane weighing barely 1,220 pounds, flown by a pilot the Germans would come to call the Mad Major. The mathematics of the engagement defied logic. The L-4's 65-horsepower Continental engine generated less power than the cooling fan on a Tiger tank. Its top speed of 85 miles per hour was slower than a Panther could traverse its turret. Its cotton fabric skin could be penetrated by a pistol round. Yet by the end of that September day, 2 Panther tanks would lie smoking in the French countryside, their crews stunned that they had been destroyed by what looked like a civilian training plane. The Battle of Arracourt represented Germany's last major armoured counteroffensive in Lorraine. General Hasso von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army had assembled 262 tanks and assault guns, including the elite 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, alongside the veteran 11th Panzer Division. These units fielded 107 Panthers and 75 Panzerfahrers, supported by 80 assault guns, a formidable force intended to halt Patton's advance toward the German border. Among the attacking force was the 113th Panzer Brigade, hastily formed but equipped with some of Germany's most advanced armour. The Panther tanks advancing that morning represented the pinnacle of German engineering, each mounting a high-velocity 75mm gun capable of destroying any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 metres. Their frontal armour, sloped at 55 degrees and 80mm thick, could deflect most Allied anti-tank weapons. Yet these magnificent machines had one critical vulnerability that their designers had never seriously considered. The roof armour measured only 16 to 25mm thick on Panthers and 25mm on Tigers. German engineers had prioritised protection against ground-level threats, never imagining that their greatest danger might come from above, and certainly not from an observation plane armed with infantry weapons. German doctrine regarding observation aircraft had been consistent throughout the war. L-4 Grasshoppers and similar light planes were considered harmless spotters, best left alone to avoid revealing positions and drawing artillery fire. Shooting at them would only confirm German locations for the Allied artillery observers. This tactical calculation was about to change dramatically. Lieutenant General Walter Kruger, commanding the 58th Panzer Corps, would later assess these new panzer brigades as having slight combat value due to incomplete training and equipment. The units lacked adequate reconnaissance capabilities, forcing them to advance blindly against the Americans. They were about to encounter something their training had never prepared them for. Charles Marston Carpenter was born August 29, 1912, in rural Illinois to a farming family that would lose everything in the Great Depression. The divorce of his parents meant young Charles and his siblings often worked on neighbours' farms to make ends meet. Yet he excelled academically, earning scholarships to Roosevelt Military Academy in Aledo, Illinois, and Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Before the war, Carpenter taught history at Moline High School, where he met and married Elda Fritchell in 1940. They had a daughter, Carol, but war was coming. When America entered the conflict in 1942, the 30-year-old teacher enlisted, was commissioned as a second lieutenant, and completed flight training. By 1944, promoted to major, he was assigned to the 1st Bombardment Division in France, then transferred to fly artillery support missions for General George S. Patton's 4th Armoured Division. His primary duty involved flying reconnaissance and artillery spotting missions in an L-4H Grasshopper, military designation for the Piper J-3 Cub. He also served as personal pilot for General John S. Wood, the 4th Armoured Division commander, which gave him unusual freedom to pursue his own initiatives. The aircraft assigned to him, serial number 43-30426, would soon gain a name that played off the famous Rosie the Riveter, Rosie the Rocketer. In August 1944, Carpenter wrote home to Elder, "Lately I have been taking quite a few chances, but my luck has been marvellous. Yesterday I got a bullet hole through the wing and hit a church steeple with one wheel. It was very little for what might have happened under the circumstances." His philosophy of warfare was simple and direct. As he told Associated Press correspondent Wes Gallagher, "My idea of fighting a war is to attack, and then attack again." Carpenter wasn't the first to conceive of arming an L-4. Lieutenants Harley Merrick and Roy Carson had experimented with mounting bazookas on their observation planes earlier, successfully destroying 2 German trucks. But Carpenter would perfect the technique and take it to unprecedented levels. The modification began with 2 M1A1 bazookas attached to the wing struts. Working with ordnance technicians, Carpenter developed a mounting system using plywood backing plates to distribute the weight and recoil forces across the fragile wing structure. Electrical wiring ran from the launch tubes to toggle switches in the cockpit, allowing him to fire the rockets individually or in salvos. Initial tests revealed problems. The M1A1 bazookas with their 2.36-inch diameter rockets could penetrate about 3 inches of armour, sufficient for light vehicles but marginal against tank armour. Carpenter upgraded to 6 M9 bazookas, firing the improved M6A 3H EAT, high-explosive anti-tank rockets. These could penetrate 3.9 inches of armour at a 30-degree impact angle, enough to defeat the thin top armour of any German tank. The complete modification added approximately 106 pounds to an aircraft already operating at its maximum weight capacity. With a gross weight limit of 1,220 pounds and the pilot, fuel and basic equipment already accounting for most of that, Carpenter had to fly alone. The observer's position remained empty. There simply wasn't enough lift capacity for another person. The aerodynamic impact was significant. The bazookas created substantial drag, reducing the already modest top speed and making the aircraft even more sluggish in turns. The plane that had been designed for gentle observation flights now carried the firepower of a half-dozen infantry anti-tank teams. The technical challenge of hitting a tank from an L-4 seemed insurmountable. The aircraft had no gun sight, no aiming system beyond the pilot's eye. The bazookas were fixed to fire straight ahead, meaning Carpenter had to point the entire aircraft at his target. The M6A3 rockets had an effective range of about 300 yards, but accuracy decreased dramatically beyond 100 yards. To achieve a hit, Carpenter developed a specific attack profile that would become his signature technique. Starting from an altitude of about 1,500 feet, he would spot his target and begin a corkscrew descent to confuse anti-aircraft gunners. This spiral approach made it difficult for ground forces to predict his flight path and establish an effective lead for their weapons. At approximately 300 feet, he would level out briefly, align his aircraft with the target, then push into a steep dive. The final approach required nerves of steel. At 100 yards, barely 300 feet from the target, Carpenter would toggle his firing switches, sending rockets streaking toward the enemy armour. Immediately after firing, he would pull up sharply, using every bit of the L-4's limited power to climb away from the inevitable return fire. The entire attack sequence, from beginning the dive to climbing away, took less than 30 seconds, but those were 30 seconds of maximum vulnerability. The Continental O-65 engine struggled with the additional weight and drag of the rocket installation. The plane's normal climb rate of 450 feet per minute dropped to barely 200 feet per minute when fully loaded with rockets. Every foot of altitude was precious. It meant another second away from effective small arms range, another moment to plan the next attack. The morning of September 20th, 1944, began with thick fog that grounded most aircraft. Combat Command A, under Colonel Bruce C. Clark, was holding positions near Arracourt when intelligence reported German armour massing for an attack. Carpenter took off despite the weather, trusting that conditions would improve. When the fog lifted around noon, Carpenter was already airborne, searching for targets. Below him, elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade were advancing, a company of Panther tanks moving in formation across open ground toward American positions. The German crews, trained to scan for enemy tanks and anti-tank guns, never considered the small observation planes circling above as a threat. Carpenter began his attack run, entering the characteristic corkscrew descent that had become his trademark. The dive was steep, the aircraft shuddering as speed built up. At precisely 100 yards, he fired, 6 rockets streaking toward the lead Panther. The rockets struck the thin roof armour, penetrating into the crew compartment. The tank lurched to a stop, smoke pouring from its hatches. Banking hard left, Carpenter climbed away as machine gun fire erupted from the German column. He could hear bullets punching through the fabric skin of his aircraft as he struggled for altitude. Within 30 minutes he had landed, reloaded, and was airborne again. The second sortie found the German tanks attempting to reorganize. They had spread out, making themselves harder targets, but also disrupting their own advance. Carpenter selected another Panther and dove again. This time the Germans were ready. Small arms fire filled the air around his aircraft. The distinctive sound of bullets tearing through fabric accompanied him throughout the dive, but his aim remained true. Another Panther was knocked out, its turret crew killed by the blast that penetrated the 16mm roof armour. On his third sortie that afternoon, Carpenter found the surviving tanks beginning to reverse, their advance completely disrupted. By day's end, he had fired 16 rockets total. 2 Panther tanks were confirmed destroyed, the German advance was halted, and the legend of Bazooka Charlie was born. The 4th Armoured Division's official history would specifically note his role in stopping a German counterattack. Before Carpenter's attacks, German military doctrine treated observation aircraft as minor annoyances. Standard procedure was to ignore them unless they presented an immediate threat. Engaging them would reveal positions and invite artillery strikes, a poor tactical trade. This calculation changed completely after word spread about the rocket-armed L-4s. German units began receiving urgent bulletins warning them about American observation planes carrying anti-tank weapons. What had been harmless spotters were now potential tank killers requiring immediate engagement. Carpenter himself noticed the change immediately. As he told a Stars and Stripes reporter, "Every time I show up now, they shoot with everything they have. They never used to bother Cubs. Bazookas must be bothering them a bit." The impact on German operations went beyond the tanks actually destroyed. Tank commanders now had to constantly watch the skies for slow-moving aircraft. Formations had to spread out when L-4s appeared, disrupting their momentum and coordination. Anti-aircraft weapons had to be redirected from protecting against fighter bombers to engaging observation planes. Infantry units were ordered to engage any L-4 with rifles and machine pistols, creating a curtain of fire that made low-altitude operations increasingly hazardous. The 113th Panzer Brigade, which had entered the Battle of Arracourt with 90 tanks, would have only 27 operational within a week. While not all these losses can be attributed to Carpenter, his attacks contributed to the psychological pressure that degraded German combat effectiveness. Tank crews who had felt relatively safe from air attack in poor weather now faced a threat that could appear at any moment. October 1944 saw Carpenter refine his tactics and increase his effectiveness. Now famous within the Third Army, he was given freedom to hunt targets of opportunity. In that month alone, he was credited with destroying 4 more tanks and an armoured truck, bringing his official total to 6 tanks destroyed, including 2 Tiger I heavy tanks as part of that total. On October 4th, Carpenter engaged a column of German armour attempting to counterattack near Château Salins. Diving through intense small arms fire, he destroyed a Panzer IV with a direct hit to its engine deck. The burning tank blocked a narrow road, trapping the vehicles behind it and making them easy targets for American tank destroyers. A week later, near Moncourt Woods, Carpenter spotted Tiger tanks supporting a German infantry attack. The Tigers, with their 88mm guns and heavy armour, were the most feared tanks in the German arsenal. Each weighed 57 tons and mounted armour up to 100mm thick on the front hull, but their roof armour was only 25mm, still vulnerable to Carpenter's rockets. His attack on the Tigers required exceptional courage. These tanks were typically surrounded by infantry and light anti-aircraft guns specifically to protect against air attack. Carpenter dove through a curtain of tracer fire, released his rockets at minimum range, and pulled up just as explosions erupted behind him. One Tiger was confirmed destroyed, its ammunition detonating in a spectacular explosion. The impact extended beyond the physical destruction. German tank crews, already stressed by American material superiority, now faced a threat from an unexpected direction. They could no longer park under trees for concealment. The L-4s could spot them anyway. They couldn't ignore the sound of small aircraft engines. Any one of them might be armed. Each mission Carpenter flew pushed the boundaries of both physics and probability. The L-4 was never designed for combat. Its fuel tanks were not self-sealing. A single tracer round could turn the aircraft into a fireball. The pilot sat surrounded by nothing more than steel tubing and fabric, completely exposed to enemy fire. In his letters home, carefully censored to avoid worrying his wife, Carpenter hinted at the dangers. After one mission, he wrote simply, "Had some excitement today. The plane has a few more holes, but still flies fine." What he didn't mention was that those holes represented near misses that could have severed control cables, punctured fuel lines, or struck the pilot himself. Ground crews who serviced Rosie the Rocketer began keeping informal tallies of the damage. After particularly intense missions, they would count dozens of bullet holes requiring patches. The crew chief reportedly told other pilots that Carpenter's plane looked like Swiss cheese after one engagement, yet somehow both pilot and aircraft continued to fly. The psychological pressure was immense. Unlike bomber crews who flew at 20,000 feet, relatively removed from the immediate violence of combat, Carpenter engaged at point-blank range. He could see the individual German soldiers firing at him, see the expressions on tank commanders' faces as they realized what was happening. The combat was intensely personal and immediate. Wes Gallagher, the Associated Press correspondent who interviewed Carpenter multiple times, wrote in Liberty magazine that the Major was a legend in an outfit where reckless bravery is commonplace. But Gallagher also noted something else, a weariness in Carpenter's eyes, the look of a man who had pushed his luck repeatedly and knew the odds. The bazooka installation on Carpenter's L-4 underwent constant refinement based on combat experience. The original mounting system using simple metal brackets proved inadequate. The recoil forces would gradually work the brackets loose. The plywood backing plates distributed the forces better, but added crucial weight to an already overloaded aircraft. The electrical firing system presented particular challenges. The wiring had to be routed through the wings and into the cockpit, protected from both weather and enemy fire. Toggle switches were mounted on a simple panel within easy reach of the pilot's right hand. Each switch controlled one rocket, allowing for single shots or volleys. The system had to be reliable enough to function after hours of vibration and extreme maneuvers, yet simple enough to repair with basic tools. Aiming remained entirely visual and intuitive. Carpenter developed his own system of reference points, using the engine cowling, the cockpit framework, and even scratches on the windscreen as aiming guides. He calculated lead angles based on his approach speed and dive angle, compensating for wind drift and the rocket's trajectory. There was no backup system, no second chance. If he missed, he had to climb away under fire and try again. The rockets themselves presented unique challenges. The M6A3 heat rounds were designed for ground combat, fired from a soldier's shoulder at relatively stationary targets. Fired from a moving aircraft, their accuracy decreased significantly. The rocket motor burned for only 0.3 seconds, reaching maximum velocity quickly, but then coasting to the target. Wind, aircraft motion, and the rocket's inherent inaccuracy meant that even perfect aim didn't guarantee a hit. The Battle of Arracourt, where Carpenter achieved his most famous success, represented more than just a tactical engagement. It was the largest tank battle on the Western Front, with American forces ultimately destroying 200 German tanks and assault guns, while losing only 25 of their own. The German plan called for the 5th Panzer Army to break through American lines and recapture Nancy, threatening Patton's entire advance. The attacking force included some of Germany's best remaining armoured units, though many were understrength and hastily reorganised after the disasters in Normandy. The 4th Armoured Division, Carpenter's unit, bore the brunt of the German assault. Outnumbered significantly, they relied on superior tactics, better logistics, and innovative solutions like Carpenter's tank-hunting L-4. The division's tank destroyers, artillery and armour worked in coordination, with Carpenter providing critical reconnaissance and direct attack capability. His actions on September 20th came at a crucial moment. The German advance had achieved initial surprise, and some American positions were in danger of being overrun. By disrupting the Panther Company's attack, Carpenter bought time for American forces to reorganize and bring up reinforcements. His attack wasn't just tactically successful, it had operational implications for the entire battle. The psychological impact rippled through German ranks. Tank crews who had felt relatively safe from air attack, American fighter bombers rarely operated in poor weather, now had to fear even the smallest observation aircraft. The need to constantly scan for L-4s and disperse when they appeared slowed German operations and disrupted their coordination. By November 1944, Carpenter had become a celebrity within the Third Army. Stars and Stripes ran multiple articles about Bazooka Charlie. Popular Science featured him in their February 1945 issue as What's New in Aviation, Piper Cub Tank Buster. Liberty magazine, the New York Sun, and other publications picked up his story, making him one of the most famous pilots of the European theatre. But fame came with increased danger. German units were specifically warned about rocket-armed Cubs. Anti-aircraft defences were reinforced with light guns and additional machine guns, specifically to counter the L-4 threat. Every mission became increasingly hazardous as German gunners gained experience engaging slow-moving aircraft at low altitude. Carpenter's own comments to reporters revealed his fatalistic attitude. "Some people around here think I'm nuts," he said, "but I just believe that if we're going to fight a war, we have to get on with it 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day." When asked about the danger, he simply shrugged. "My luck has been marvellous." That luck was tested repeatedly. Beyond the church steeple incident he mentioned in his letter home, there were other close calls. Machine gun fire once severed one of his elevator control cables, leaving him with minimal pitch control for the flight back to friendly territory. Another time, an anti-aircraft shell exploded close enough to pepper his aircraft with shrapnel, miraculously missing both the pilot and critical control systems. His crew chief, whose name has been lost to history, reportedly begged Carpenter to stop flying the rocket attacks. The ground crew had seen too many L-4s return riddled with holes or not return at all. But Carpenter continued, driven by a combination of duty and determination that fellow pilots found both inspiring and concerning. Carpenter's courage wasn't limited to aerial combat. On at least one documented occasion, he landed his L-4 near a battlefield, grabbed a discarded M1 rifle, and participated in ground combat. After destroying a German column with his bazookas, he landed on a nearby road and took 6 German soldiers prisoner, marching them back to American lines at gunpoint. Another incident involved Carpenter landing near a disabled American Sherman tank under German fire. He climbed onto the tank and manned the .50 caliber machine gun, helping to drive off a German infantry assault while the tank crew conducted emergency repairs. His actions that day earned particular recognition from the tank crew, who credited him with saving their lives. These ground combat episodes earned him recognition beyond his aviation achievements. General Patton himself presented Carpenter with the Silver Star, reportedly saying, "This was the kind of fighting man he wanted in his army." Carpenter would also receive the Bronze Star with Oak Leaf Cluster and the Air Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster. The ground combat episodes revealed something important about Carpenter's character. He wasn't content to be merely an observer or even a flying tank destroyer. He wanted to be in the fight wherever it was happening, using whatever weapons were available. This attitude, while admirable, also suggested a man pushing himself beyond reasonable limits. The official records credit Carpenter with destroying 6 tanks total, including 2 Tiger I heavy tanks among that number, plus several armoured cars and trucks. Unofficial accounts, including claims by witnesses, suggest the number might have been as high as 14 tanks destroyed or disabled. The discrepancy likely reflects the difficulty of confirming kills in fluid combat situations, where multiple weapons systems engaged the same targets. Each confirmed kill required extraordinary circumstances to align perfectly. The weather had to be suitable for flying, but poor enough that German fighters weren't active. Carpenter had to locate targets, approach without being shot down, achieve accurate rocket hits on vulnerable areas, and survive the return flight. The mathematical probability of success was minimal, yet he succeeded repeatedly. Consider the technical challenge: hitting a 20-foot by 10-foot target, the approximate dimensions of a tank's top armour, while flying at 70 miles per hour from a distance of 100 yards, using unguided rockets fired from an unstable platform while under fire. Artillery observers who witnessed Carpenter's attacks described them as impossible and insane. The 2 Tiger I tanks Carpenter destroyed represented particularly impressive achievements. Each Tiger cost 250,000 Reichsmarks to produce and required specialized crews trained for months. They were considered nearly invulnerable to most Allied weapons. Yet they fell to rockets fired from an aircraft that cost the US Army $2,500 and required only basic pilot training to fly. Carpenter's role extended beyond tank hunting. As an observation pilot and General Wood's personal aviator, he provided crucial intelligence that shaped operational decisions. His ability to fly low and slow, combined with his aggressive reconnaissance style, meant he often spotted German movements before other intelligence sources. His reports influenced several major decisions during the Lorraine campaign. When German forces attempted to concentrate for counterattacks, Carpenter's early warnings allowed American commanders to pre-position reserves and artillery. His detailed observations of German defensive positions helped plan successful attacks with minimal casualties. The intelligence value of the L-4s was already well established, but Carpenter's aggressive tactics yielded even more information. By forcing German units to react to his presence, shooting at him, dispersing their formations, moving to cover, he revealed positions and strengths that might otherwise have remained hidden. This intelligence work, while less dramatic than his tank hunting exploits, may have been his most valuable contribution to the war effort. The information he provided saved American lives and shortened engagements that might otherwise have become prolonged battles of attrition. The success of Carpenter's improvised weapon system highlighted a curious aspect of World War II technology. Germany, despite its reputation for advanced weaponry, had no equivalent to the simple, effective L-4 observation plane. The Wehrmacht relied on the Fieseler Vieh 156 Storch for similar missions, but it was larger, more complex, and produced in much smaller numbers. The American approach, mass production of simple, reliable equipment, proved superior to German emphasis on technological sophistication. The L-4 was essentially a civilian aircraft pressed into military service with minimal modifications. Yet its simplicity was its strength, easy to fly, maintain and repair with basic tools and materials. Germany's tank designers had created magnificent machines optimized for tank versus tank combat. The Panther's long 75mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at ranges where return fire was ineffective. Its frontal armour was nearly impervious to Allied weapons. But this optimization for ground combat left vulnerabilities that simple American ingenuity could exploit. The bazooka itself represented American pragmatism. Developed quickly from a simple concept, mass-produced in huge numbers, it gave every infantry squad anti-tank capability. When Carpenter mounted 6 of them on an observation plane, he created a weapons system that German doctrine had never anticipated and couldn't effectively counter. As 1944 turned to 1945, Carpenter continued flying combat missions despite increasing German awareness of the rocket-armed Cubs. The Wehrmacht issued specific instructions for dealing with armed observation aircraft, including dedicating anti-aircraft weapons to tracking them whenever they appeared. In December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, Carpenter flew reconnaissance missions in terrible weather conditions that grounded most aircraft. His reports on German movements helped American commanders respond to the surprise offensive. Though he had fewer opportunities for tank hunting in the poor weather, his intelligence gathering proved invaluable. January 1945 brought renewed offensive operations as American forces pushed toward the Rhine. Carpenter continued modifying his tactics, experimenting with different attack angles and rocket combinations. He reportedly considered adding more rockets but was limited by the L-4's weight capacity and the structural limits of the wing struts. His last confirmed tank kill came in February 1945, when he destroyed a Panzer IV attempting to defend a bridge crossing. Witnesses described him diving through a wall of tracers to deliver his rockets at point-blank range. The tank's destruction allowed American engineers to capture the bridge intact, accelerating the advance into Germany. In March 1945, Carpenter began experiencing severe fatigue and other symptoms that forced him to reduce his flying schedule. Medical examination revealed advanced Hodgkin's disease, a cancer of the lymphatic system. Army doctors gave him a prognosis of 2 years to live. The diagnosis ended his combat flying immediately. He was evacuated to the United States for treatment, leaving behind Rosie the Rocketer and the reputation he had earned as one of the war's most unusual aces. His war was over, though the war itself would continue for 2 more months. The timing was perhaps fortunate. As German forces became increasingly desperate in the war's final months, anti-aircraft defences became more deadly. Several L-4s attempting to emulate Carpenter's tactics were shot down in March and April 1945. The window of opportunity for his unique form of warfare was closing. Carpenter received an honourable discharge from the Army in 1946 and returned to teaching. Against medical predictions, he survived far longer than the 2 years doctors had given him. He taught history at Urbana High School in Illinois, married life resuming with Elder and their daughter, Carol. Remarkably, he rarely spoke about his wartime experiences. His daughter later revealed that she knew little about his combat record until after his death. This silence was common among combat veterans, but particularly poignant given the extraordinary nature of Carpenter's service. In summers, he ran a boys' camp in the Ozarks, teaching outdoor skills and character development. Former campers, interviewed decades later, remembered him as strict but fair, demanding but supportive. None knew they were being taught by one of the war's most decorated tank hunters. His health gradually deteriorated through the 1950s and early 1960s. The Hodgkin's disease that should have killed him in 1947 instead became a chronic condition he battled for 20 years. He continued teaching until shortly before his death on March 22, 1966, at age 53. For decades after the war, the fate of Rosie the Rocketer remained unknown. The aircraft had presumably been scrapped like thousands of other war-surplus L-4s, its historical significance unrecognized. Then, in October 2017, aviation historians made a remarkable discovery. Serial number 43-30426 was found in the collection of the Austrian Aviation Museum in Bad Vöslau, Austria. How it arrived there remains unclear, but the aircraft was definitely Carpenter's. Serial numbers and other markings confirmed its identity. More remarkably, the aircraft retained evidence of its combat service, including multiple professionally patched bullet holes. The Collings Foundation acquired the aircraft in 2019 and brought it back to the United States. A careful restoration followed, with historians and technicians working to return Rosie to her wartime configuration. The bullet hole patches were preserved as historical evidence of the aircraft's combat service. The restoration revealed previously undocumented details about Carpenter's modifications. The mounting points for the bazookas were still visible on the wing struts. Analysis of the patches showed that bullets had struck from multiple angles, confirming accounts of attacks through heavy ground fire. Some patches overlapped, suggesting the aircraft had been repaired multiple times between missions. While Carpenter's bazooka-armed L-4 was never officially adopted as a weapons system, the concept influenced military thinking about organic army aviation. The idea that ground forces needed their own air support, not dependent on Air Force priorities, gained credibility through examples like Carpenter's direct battlefield intervention. The Korean War saw limited experiments with armed light aircraft, though none achieved Carpenter's success. The real vindication of his concept came with the development of attack helicopters in the 1960s. The AH-1 Cobra and later Apache helicopters embodied the same principle: slow, low-altitude platforms delivering direct fire support to ground forces. Modern military doctrine recognizes the value of what Carpenter demonstrated, that air support doesn't always require fast jets and heavy bombs. Sometimes, precise firepower delivered at close range by a platform that can loiter and observe is more valuable than high-speed attack runs. The improvised nature of Carpenter's weapon system also influenced military thinking about field modifications and soldier-driven innovation. The US military became more receptive to bottom-up improvements, recognizing that combat troops often developed practical solutions that engineers hadn't anticipated. In 2023, Carpenter's daughter Carol Apaki co-authored Bazooka Charlie, The Unbelievable Story of Major Charles Carpenter and Rosie the Rocketer, with aviation writer James P. Boucher. The book, based on hundreds of preserved letters and photographs, revealed the man behind the legend. The letters showed a complex individual, brave but not reckless, aggressive but thoughtful. His writing revealed someone who understood the moral complexities of war while maintaining absolute determination to do his duty. He expressed pride in his achievements, but also sadness at the necessity of killing. One particularly poignant letter, written after destroying a Tiger tank, reflected on the humanity of his enemies. They were someone's sons, perhaps fathers. But they were trying to kill my friends, and I couldn't allow that. This emotional intelligence, combined with tactical brilliance, made him exceptional among warriors. Carol Apaki described her father as a peaceful man who compartmentalized his war experiences. He had moved on, emotionally, she said in interviews. I think he came back from the war shattered, and it was a hard time for my mother too, trying to start her life over again, waiting for 4 years for him to come home, thinking he never would. A bronze sculpture unveiled at Moline High School in 2023 commemorates Carpenter's service, showing him standing beside a representation of his L-4. The dedication ceremony drew veterans, historians, and aviation enthusiasts from across the country. Former students from his teaching years, now elderly themselves, shared memories of a dedicated educator who never mentioned his wartime heroics. The American Heritage Museum in Massachusetts, where the restored Rosie the Rocketer is displayed, created an extensive exhibit about Carpenter's service. Visitors can see the actual aircraft, complete with bullet holes, and learn about the man who turned an observation plane into a tank destroyer. The Experimental Aircraft Association features Carpenter's story in educational programs, using his innovation as an example of American ingenuity and determination. Young pilots learn not just about his tactical achievements, but about the kind of thinking that turns limitations into advantages. Military historians continue to study Carpenter's tactics and their impact on the Lorraine campaign. While his 6 confirmed tank kills might seem modest compared to the thousands of tanks destroyed in World War II, the psychological and tactical impact far exceeded the raw numbers. Carpenter's success raises important questions about innovation, courage, and the nature of warfare. How did a history teacher with no special combat training become one of the war's most unusual aces? The answer lies in a combination of factors that rarely align. First, his position as General Wood's personal pilot gave him unusual freedom to pursue his own initiatives. Most L-4 pilots were restricted to specific reconnaissance patterns and schedules. Carpenter could hunt targets of opportunity, choosing when and where to strike. Second, his teaching background may have contributed to his tactical thinking. History teachers understand patterns, cause and effect, and the importance of timing. Carpenter applied these analytical skills to combat, recognizing vulnerabilities others might have missed. Third, the specific conditions of the Lorraine campaign created opportunities for his unique tactics. The relatively open terrain, the concentration of German armour, and the fluid nature of the battle meant targets were available if one was brave enough to engage them. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Carpenter possessed a rare combination of courage and fatalism that allowed him to repeatedly risk everything. His comment about attacking 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day revealed someone who had accepted the likelihood of death and decided to make it count. The statistics of Carpenter's combat service, when examined closely, reveal the extraordinary nature of his achievement. 6 tanks officially confirmed destroyed, including 2 Tiger I heavy tanks within that total. Multiple armoured vehicles and trucks destroyed. 16 rockets fired in 3 sorties on September 20th, 1944, alone. Approximately 100 combat missions flown. 0 L-4 Grasshoppers lost despite multiple bullet strikes. 1 pilot survived what should have been impossible odds. Each number represents dozens of split-second decisions, any one of which could have been fatal. The fact that Carpenter survived his combat tour defied probability. Contemporary pilots who attempted similar tactics rarely survived more than a few missions. The economic equation was equally remarkable. The total cost of Carpenter's L-4 and modifications was less than $5,000. The Tiger tanks he destroyed cost over 250,000 Reichsmarks each to produce, not counting training crews and transportation to the battlefield. In purely financial terms, Carpenter achieved one of the highest return on investment ratios of the war. Despite extensive documentation, some aspects of Carpenter's story remain mysterious. How did he maintain the psychological stability to continue such dangerous missions? What drove him to push beyond the already dangerous job of observation, flying into the realm of direct combat? His letters provide some clues but no complete answers. He wrote about duty, about protecting fellow soldiers, about wanting the war to end so he could return home. But these motivations, while admirable, don't fully explain the extraordinary risks he took. Perhaps the answer lies in his generational context. The men who fought World War II had survived the Depression, understanding hardship and sacrifice. They had witnessed the rise of fascism and understood it as an existential threat to democracy. For someone like Carpenter, who taught history and understood the stakes, half measures were unacceptable. Or perhaps it was simpler. In war, ordinary people sometimes do extraordinary things because circumstances demand it. Carpenter saw a problem, German tanks killing Americans, and found a solution, however improbable. That the solution required flying a fabric-covered plane into point-blank range of enemy guns was simply an acceptable risk. Carpenter's innovations influenced more than just military tactics. His story became part of the mythology of American ingenuity, the idea that a clever individual with basic tools could overcome sophisticated enemy technology through determination and creative thinking. This narrative resonated particularly strongly in post-war America, as the nation sought to understand its victory over enemies that had seemed so formidable. Carpenter's David versus Goliath story provided a perfect metaphor, American practicality and individual initiative triumphing over German engineering and military tradition. The story also influenced how the military thought about innovation. Rather than dismissing unconventional ideas from junior officers or enlisted personnel, commanders became more open to field expedients and soldier-driven improvements. The lesson of Bazooka Charlie was clear. Sometimes the best solutions come from those closest to the problem. For the aviation community, Carpenter's exploits demonstrated the versatility of light aircraft. The humble Piper Cub, designed as a trainer and pleasure aircraft, had proven capable of roles its designers never imagined. This versatility would influence post-war aircraft development, with designers increasingly considering multiple potential uses for their creations. The story of Charles Bazooka Charlie Carpenter defies conventional military narrative. A history teacher flying an unarmed observation plane should not have been able to destroy German heavy tanks. A fabric-covered aircraft with a 65-horsepower engine should not have survived repeated combat missions against ground fire. 6 bazookas strapped to wing struts should not have constituted an effective weapons system. Yet all of these things happened. Between September 1944 and February 1945, Carpenter transformed the L-4 Grasshopper from a passive observation platform into an active combat system. His official tally of 6 tanks destroyed, with 2 Tiger I tanks among that total, stands as one of the most improbable achievements in military aviation history. The German forces at Arracourt and throughout the Lorraine campaign learned to fear the sound of small aircraft engines. What had been harmless spotters became potential death from above. Tank crews who had felt relatively safe from American fighter bombers, which rarely operated in poor weather or at low altitude, now faced a threat they couldn't effectively counter. The transformation in German tactics, from ignoring L-4s to engaging them with everything they have, demonstrates the strategic impact of one pilot's innovation. Carpenter forced the Wehrmacht to adapt its anti-aircraft defences, disperse its armoured formations, and constantly monitor the skies for slow-moving aircraft. These adjustments disrupted German operations and contributed to American success in the Lorraine campaign. More than military achievement, Carpenter's story represents the triumph of ingenuity over conventional thinking. Faced with the problem of German armour, he created an unprecedented solution using available materials and sheer determination. The bazookas were designed for infantry. The L-4 was designed for observation. Combined by someone willing to risk everything, they became something neither designers nor military planners had imagined. The restored Rosie the Rocketer, now displayed with its battle damage preserved, stands as a testament to American innovation and individual courage. Each patched bullet hole represents a moment when probability suggested failure, yet Carpenter pressed his attack. The aircraft that should have been destroyed multiple times instead survived to tell its story to future generations. Charles Carpenter died in 1966, having outlived his doctor's prognosis by 19 years. He spent those years teaching young Americans about history, perhaps hoping they would understand that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when circumstances demand it. His students remembered him as demanding but fair, never knowing they were being taught by someone who had changed the nature of aerial warfare through sheer will and innovation. The German tank crews who faced him in France would have been stunned to learn their nemesis was a high school history teacher. They would have been equally amazed to discover that the weapon system that terrorized them was nothing more than 6 infantry bazookas strapped to a civilian aircraft. But perhaps they would have understood the larger truth. In war, innovation, courage, and determination can overcome seemingly impossible odds. The L-4 Grasshopper that hunted panthers and tigers across France proved that David could still defeat Goliath, especially when David had 6 slingshots and the courage to use them at point-blank range. In the end, that may be the most important lesson from Bazooka Charlie's war, that human ingenuity and raw courage can transform even the humblest tools into weapons of victory.